All right. Hello, 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 everybody. We are live with the Dev Talk Show. It is Wednesday, and I'm here with Rich Ross, my buddy. Rich, how are you, Rich?
Good, Andy. How's it going? And good to see you there. We have a little bit of a space in between us, a bigger space than we typically have right now.
Void. A
A little bit
void,
of a
right?
void, yes.
Void. So Chris isn't here. We think he's going to be joining us a little bit later. We hope he will. We always hope he's here. We always hope that we're all here, and we hope that you're all here with us live out there on the internet. Tune in for the Dev Talk Show. It's Wednesday night. It's 8:30. Well, it's a little later than 8:30, and we got ourselves going. We got a show. We've had uh, we've had some good shows lately.
Yeah.
Talking about a variety of stuff. I'm actually going to go check on. I'm just going to look at our YouTube channel because I want to look back and see some of our older what we've been doing lately. I'm going to sort of recap. So lately we've been talking about. Yeah, well, we did GitHub Copilot, which was really cool.
That was fun. That was a lot of fun.
And yeah, I'm really looking forward to playing with that more. I haven't even signed up for the trial. Like, I guess I should put myself on the list. I admittedly haven't done that yet.
Oh, it's like the lottery. You can't win if you don't play, man.
Exactly, right. Before that, we did the fun episode on like challenge-based learning,
Yeah.
where we did some puzzles. As a matter of fact, we even combined the two last week, if I remember correctly, right? So
Yes.
2 weeks ago, I think if I have the order right, we did challenge-based learning, where Chris showed us some cool websites where you can like do like developer puzzles, right? They're not super hard. They're not like 1,000 lines of code. It's usually a couple lines of code, but it's made to like sort of stimulate your brain and get you going and have fun. Last week, Rich showed us GitHub Copilot, which I guess you would say is like AI of sorts for write. I don't know if they call it that, but AI of for writing code.
Yeah.
Where we did some cool samples where we typed in comments, and based on the comment in the code, the comment, it like wrote a bunch of code for us, and we're like, wow, that's really cool, right? Then we even tried solving one of the challenge-based learning puzzles with GitHub Copilot, and I think we had mixed results with that, but that's not the point. It was really cool. It was fun.
Well,
Um,
it was still early, right? And it's one of those interesting things to think about where it might be heading towards. Certainly not ready for. It's still a preview at this point, so not something everybody can kind of get their hands on and use for production code. But it was just fun to be able to throw some different things at it and see what could be done there.
yeah, exactly. It was fun. And so if you haven't seen those shows, you can head over to youtube.com/the Dev Talk Show and check them out. And if you like them, give it the thumbs up. That's a good way for us to know that people like some of the content, and we, gives us a clue as to what other kind of things we should be doing. What else have we talked about recently? We talked about static site generators. We did some Blazor. We've done a bunch of stuff, and we thought for tonight's show we'd turn back to a topic that has been pretty popular on our show, where we've been talking about. We've had a couple of different shows where people were talking, a lot of people joined in with the chat and stuff, and we were talking about like how to get a job, or how to learn this, or how to learn that, building your skills and different things like that. Tonight we thought we'd talk a little bit about creating a resume, because I believe in the past we even had questions about that, like what would be good format for resumes and all that kind of stuff. So we thought, why not do that as a show? And I guess that's what we're going to do tonight, right, Rich?
Yeah, yeah. I think we have some. We didn't talk a lot about this, but it was one of those things where there were some interesting conversations we've had recently about resumes and about job searches and how you find a job, right? And then there were some other thoughts around what the resume does for you, right? Is it the thing that gets you in the door, or is it the thing that just kind of helps get you through the process? And there's some, love to have a conversation with those who might be listening around either of those ideas, because I think the classic way we think about a resume has, at least from when I first started doing them, they've changed a good bit. So maybe maybe that is some of where the direction goes too. But that's why we have chat, and that's why we hope to have people here engaged in the conversation, because we want to hear what your thoughts are, because we're just a couple of older guys who might have some old opinions on what might be there or what they might be for. So.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting, right? Things have changed over time. So I'm coming at this from not the job seeker perspective, but I'm a hiring manager, right? So a lot of resumes come across, and so while I haven't searched for a job in a while, I haven't built the resume in a while, I get a lot of them coming across my desk over time. And I've seen some good ones. I've seen some bad ones. I've seen mixes of all kinds of things. And you know what? I guess there's a disclaimer that goes on this at the top of this, which, is so often the disclaimer, the old "it depends" kind of thing, right? There's not really a right answer to this. So we're going to throw out some opinions here on what we think makes a good resume and good content for a resume and all that kind of stuff. But that doesn't mean that someone who's reviewing a resume, you could submit to a job, and someone with a different opinion might look at things differently. And there's always that case, right? There's always that case. And so, we need to be careful with all these kind of things. Oh, look at this. Look at this. So Richard Corkery says, resume building, I'm all ears, eyes. That's just nice. Rude. And that's rude because he works for me. Why is that rude? Right? So,
I didn't know that. All right.
So Richard, great to have you here tonight. If you have any ideas, you want to throw in some tips and tricks and things like that, and what you look for in a resume, feel free to contribute to the chat. But no, he will not be putting his resume together. No. So anyway, right. So it's a fun topic. It's a light topic, I think. But it's an important topic, right? This is really important, and I think we want to consider a lot of different things. I already said something about how like a different manager is going to view a resume differently, right? Well, different people have to build resumes differently as well. What is the job you're going for? What is your experience level? Sure, you could say, oh, if I have less experience, I'm going to put less. I have less to put on my resume. But you might even have a different style of resume. There might be different things you would include, and all kinds of different things, right? That someone with more or less experience would want to consider. And here's a question right in the chat right now. By the way, our friend of the show, Richard Wysocki, says, for experienced people, thoughts on just pushing people to LinkedIn, although maybe that might need to be enhanced. That is a great topic to sort of bring up in the concept of resumes. And we haven't really started too far into this thing, but I think your LinkedIn profile is or can be a live working resume. It might not have the same level of detail, I think. When I had a resume, I put a lot more detail into like the specifics of my job, but it's a great place to get started. And I also will say this. This is a sort of a job search tip, maybe even more than a resume tip. But one of the first things I do when I get a resume is I go out there and I look on LinkedIn for the candidate, right? And I might even look at a couple of places online for the candidate. We could talk about online presence, right? But if you're looking for a job and your LinkedIn profile, I look at your resume and it's got some new stuff, and then I go to your LinkedIn profile, it's not up to date. I sometimes start to think, is this person like really serious? Like, are they putting out their best effort to find a job? Right. Now, you could say, and I'm going to throw this out to discussion right here. You could say, and I do see another comment from JCG23 about college student tips, and let's come back to that. I
definitely put a pin in that one because I want to make sure we touch on that.
Yeah, let's definitely put a pin in that one. So the thing is, someone could say, yeah, but that's not my resume. That's my I have a resume. My resume is full, and my LinkedIn profile, I don't pay a lot of attention to that. And I would think, well, you don't have to pay a lot of attention to LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to pay a lot of attention to a lot of things. But if you're serious at looking for a job, you should give yourself as many opportunities as possible. And
Yes.
I think of that in the context of, if I was hiring you, I want you to do the best job possible, and I want you to be all in to your job, right? And be sort of great at it, whatever that means, right? And I would think, shouldn't a candidate apply that to their life? Like, build your presence to find a job, right? And so I put some stock in the fact that things should be, you should have a good LinkedIn profile, right?
But I think,
And I wouldn't say just push people to LinkedIn, though. I do think it's a great place to start.
yeah.
And it's a great way to say, like, if you're casually meeting people and you don't have a resume ready yet, and you're thinking about a job, what a great thing to say is just go check me out on LinkedIn. You'll get some stuff. I'm just putting my resume together now, or something like that. If you keep LinkedIn up to date, I don't know. Thoughts, Rich?
Yeah. I think is it Devin Zara has, and I may not be showing the. Oh, it does come up there. Cool. So we do have feature chat working.
Nice.
Yeah, go figure, right? So I think it's a great point. Whereas a resume can be tailored towards a specific position you're going for, LinkedIn is kind of an all-up. Hey, this is all my experience, right? This is all of the things I've been done. It's very tough to be able to have it point, for one thing or another. And that's a really great point you're making there, Devin Zara. I also, I think. I think they serve different purposes, right? Your resume certainly has a purpose, and I think LinkedIn certainly has a purpose, not only to capture some of the experiences and things you have from the resume, but also that networking component, right? What can you do to, while you're looking, you may not have an active position somewhere that you're going through the process for, but you're starting to look. And this is great for when you think about college students. We're starting to, when you're starting to look for that position, what are those things that you can do to kind of get your connections up? And LinkedIn is a great place for that. Start looking for people who are doing things in the area you want to get into, or have positions at places where you want to potentially be employed. Even to the point of going wherever, if you graduated from university or even from high school, right? Who are colleagues or friends that you might know who might be in those types of jobs that you want to work in? Don't be shy about asking for informational interviews. I think all of those things are, and if you keep the informational interview to what it's supposed to be, right? It's, hey, tell me about your position. How did you get to the job you're in? I really want to get into that role. I want to understand what it takes to get there. And if you can kind of focus things along those lines, all of those are where LinkedIn can go over and above what a simple resume can do. And those are, I think they're great tips for college students and, anybody who's just starting to get back into the workforce and looking for some kind of position.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think LinkedIn is a great, it's a great tool. It's a great networking tool. And, again, there's a lot of places where you can build an online presence, right? And you're talking about this, like, if you don't have a lot of job experience, and this is where we go a lot when we talk about with college students, you don't have a big resume to build up.
Yeah.
But there are other things you can do to build experience, right? And one of those things is doing those posts, right? You put a post on LinkedIn, a how-to or whatever it is, and tips and things like that. There's so many things you could do. I mean, I definitely want to come back to some other tips for college students. But let's see. Now we got more from Richard here. Waisaki saying, for college, recommend make sure you highlight areas of interest, GitHub profiles, meetup events you attend. Yeah, there's so much you can do. I mean, we could stay on this topic for a couple minutes. I had a whole bunch of other tips I was going to talk about, but this is where the audience is interested. we could talk about that, right? I think it's a good
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
Um,
And I mean, I know I have, when I talk to college students or people who are of that, even high school, get yourself a LinkedIn profile, put, some information, when you start to get into college, what courses are you taking? What programs are you in? What clubs are you in? What are things that are related to eventually your career and your job? Because there's things you can start publishing even while you're in college, especially as you get into that, you know, maybe that summer internship you have, or as you start to get through senior year and you start looking. That's when you start, really starting to put information out there about yourself around what you're working on, what your interests are, things that you like, things that seem like good potential fits for you. Those are the things you want to make sure you post. I mean, get something out there, at least on a weekly basis to show what's going on.
right, right, and Richard's also talking about, so there's a couple of things on here. Talks about GitHub profiles, meetup events. So let's just, GitHub's a good one, but let's come back to
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah.
Meetups and events that you attend. Um, how great is it to show that, you might not have a job yet. You might be in school. You might have graduated from school, whatever it is. You might not have that, what you think of as like that great experience yet, that you might think you need. And I'm saying that you might think you need it. You don't need great experience to get a job, right? But you might think you do. But what can you do to make yourself to show that show you as that person who is passionate about whatever it is you do? In our case, it's technology, right? But I think these same things apply to basket weaving or automotive repair or whatever it is that you might do for a living, right?
Right.
Say list memberships. I still do it. I still say I'm an active member of well, I did when I had a resume. Like, I'm an active member of Philly.net, and I go to meetings, right? And I participate in community and things like that. I think that's a great tip from Richard Wysocki. I also think GitHub profiles, wow. Um, what a It couldn't be easier that, like, when I was looking for a job, we didn't have some of these things as easy as it is now. I can show you the code. I have my GitHub profile. You can see code I wrote,
Yep.
right? You can see the type of developer I am by going to a GitHub profile. And so if you want to show those things off, you may say, well, I don't have a job that I can show, but look at these projects I'm doing on the side, right?
Yeah.
And look at the stuff I'm doing, and here it is in GitHub, right?
Yep.
In addition to that, I'll take it a step further and say, um, not only can you show the code, but you can deploy the app easily to a modern platform. Let's just say Azure, right? With
Right.
some free Azure credits that you can get and different things. There's some ways to do this without having a huge expense, and actually use the tools that we would use in the real world, so to speak, in the job. And you can do that. You can publish your application. You can build a web app, show the source code, and publish it, and put a link to it and say, hey, here's the thing I wrote. And you might want to check out, especially if you're a web developer, you can say, check out some of the cool specific things I did on this website that you can see, or notice the performance that I'm loading 10,000 records and look how fast I'm doing it. Like, you can call those things out because you can just show people your work really easily, right? And by the way, I do notice, thank you, Devin Zara, going back to basket weaving and always good to show that that's an interest. I'm sure it's a lot of fun, as a matter of fact, basket weaving.
Yeah.
Rich,
So,
what do you think about, like, the GitHub profile and publishing actual samples of your work to a live website if you could, right?
yeah, definitely. And I think that's, the resume is, that paper, hopefully, one, maybe 2 pages of content, right? There's, we can talk about length of a resume at some point, but the idea is that is the portable piece of that. If you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen real quick. Let me see if I can do this here. Bring Skype back up, do a screen share. Make sure I get the right one. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. It's this one.
And while you're doing this, let me help set a little a little background here for college students. If JCG 23 was asking tips for college students, this goes for college students and not even college students. Like you've recent graduates and stuff like that. When we're hiring a junior developer, we are hiring a junior developer. We don't expect a junior developer to have 10 years of experience, 5 years experience, 2 years experience, maybe 2 years, maybe 1 year of experience, maybe three. It depends on where you're at in the junior, but maybe none. And it's okay to have none, right? Like
Yep.
people say, well, I don't have anything to put on my resume. It's okay. We know that, right? But what can you put on that resume to get yourself the job, right? And that's the kind of stuff I think we're starting to talk about. Is like, how can you show off some other skills? Rich, you were going to show. Were you going to share your screen, or did you?
I am. Just one quick note, because Devin Zara has that really related post, right? Actually doing that kind of work, working on projects, working on open source stuff, and publishing that as examples to build up that history while you're still in school before you get a formal job. And I think that's the beauty of it. If you're motivated and self-motivated, and when I talk to, I don't, it's been quite a while since I've had to interview somebody as a hire, but when I do, one of the things I ask them is, tell me about the stuff you're really interested in, the stuff that goes, there's certain things you have to do for work. Yeah, I work on these projects, but do you have any, what are those other projects or those other technologies that you're interested in that are kind of, outside the daily working of, what because those are the things that give help understanding of how passionate people are about the work that they're doing, especially when it comes to technology, because everybody seems to be into a couple of different technology. Sorry, as I go ahead and do this, let's see if I can switch this up.
Yeah, Devin Zara, you are doing it right. You are doing what you should be doing, right? And that's great. And there's another comment about, the mythical junior developer position. I think I understand that perspective too. And I would say I'm guilty on sort of that problem, right? Because a lot of times we look to hire, seniors and mid-level developers and things like that. I will say, honestly, due to conversations like this that I've had with people and talking a lot about how junior developers can help out a team, even interns, right? In my organization, we're looking at that now very seriously and saying, why aren't we hiring more entry-level people that we can bring into our organization and help them grow, and then they help us grow and things like that. And I think it's important. And I think we need to do, me at my company or other people out there, we, the industry, need to do a better job with junior developers and providing more opportunities, I think, Anyway, Rich, you're sharing, I think.
I'm trying to. That's a phantom. It doesn't want to share right now.
Yeah, what was that? Okay, right. Yeah, and I'm not seeing, you're not sharing it into Skype anymore, I don't think.
I think that might be it. So let's try that.
Okay, now I'm seeing myself there for some reason. Yeah, there you go. Okay.
There we go.
That's what you had up before. Okay, now let's see if you can pop that up on the screen. A little technical difficulties. Hopefully we can get this up on the screen. If not, I can share that for you because I know my screen share works.
Yeah.
Let's give Rich a sec to see if he can make the magic happen here. And we've got lots of stuff to talk about. I jotted down a list of ideas and tips for building a resume, and so happy to have people joining in the comments. And you know what? If we say something that you don't agree with, throw that in there too. Don't be afraid to say you disagree with one of our opinions, right? Because these are opinions. This kind of show is a lot of opinions. Rich, you're not having any luck with the screen share, are you?
I am not. If you want to do that, you're welcome to bring up my profile because it's public. I was just going to go and show when we talk about GitHub profile. Yes, we can put all the projects in there, but you can actually, put some interesting information about yourself in that profile, right? What are you interested in? What do you want to learn about? And it's done in a pretty interesting way that makes it, kind of catchy and.
Well, that's a great idea. I'm gonna share my screen now. Let's see if this works. Share screen, start sharing, minimize that, and this is Rich
There we
Ross's
go.
GitHub profile. Come on, baby. Let's hope this works. There it is. So here's Rich. Rich, take it away. I'm sharing my screen, but talk about this for a minute. This is cool.
Yeah, so this is it's really it's some basic functionality inside of GitHub. So we're not doing anything over. I didn't have to learn a bunch of Markdown or whatever. It's a little bit of Markdown, but there's a if you have a README in there under your profile, that it will use that to basically pull this information in, and you can see it's got some really some little emoticons in there, so you can introduce yourself, tell what you're interested in, what you're currently working on, and then what you're looking to collaborate on, and then you can also put some links in here about how people might find you. And I think all I did was to get to that. I went under my profile. So if I go to my profile, and then I have essentially Rich Ross / Rich Ross is a special repository, and its README will appear in your profile. So this is one of the cool
yeah,
features.
I can see that here, right? Rich
Yeah.
Ross / README. By the way, people are saying it's really bad pixelation in there. I don't just to be clear, and I posted the link in chat, so people asked if we could do that. I don't
Yep.
know if this is a concept here, right? Whether you can read every word here. Rich is talking about a concept about having a README and putting some content in there and making this your own, right? And another place to sort of enrich your online presence, right?
Yep. Yeah, and related to that, right? There's also I think if you go back to well, yeah, you weren't seeing what I was kind of drawing into that. But if you scroll down a little bit, we talked a little bit about blogs and static web pages, calling back a few shows ago. You can use, you don't have to worry about getting a WordPress site or standing up a blog engine on your own. If you click that blog link there on the left.
Oh, this right here.
And I'm a little
Yeah,
delayed because I think I'm looking at the show.
yeah. I know you're not seeing it, right? I clicked this one, blog.richross.dev.
Yeah. So some of these are just placeholders still, but the idea is that you can create through GitHub, essentially a GitHub Pages, your own blog. So it doesn't take much to stand these up. And it actually doesn't cost anything here because this is all getting hosted free for you as part of your account that you have up in GitHub.
That's
so
cool.
Again, ways to just market yourself and get yourself out there for people to start seeing you, depending on where you are in that job search.
Right. So, so again, let's talk about. Let's get back a little bit more towards the resume topic, right?
Yep. I'm going to switch screens.
Well, this is it's a broad topic, right? Resume, job search, all kinds of fun stuff that we can talk about here. And it's really hard when you don't have a lot yet. When you're new, when you're in college or whatever, and you don't have a lot for a resume, it's hard. But again, the good news is there's so many things you can do now to separate yourself from others, right? And a lot of that's going to be outside of the resume too, networking. Network, and I think we've talked about that in other shows, right? Meet as many people as you can, go on as many interviews as you can, go on interviews for jobs you don't even want. Get to practice. I mean, I think we've talked about it on previous shows, right?
Maybe I would come back a little bit off the ones you don't even want. I would definitely. I actually heard this from a college. Colleges have their own corporate. It's not really recruiters. Those who kind of get you ready for doing the job searches, right? And one of the things that I heard recently was prioritize a list of companies that you want to work for. Maybe the top 6 companies, and as you approach them, do them in reverse order. This way, you're not. It's not a throwaway interview, but you're working yourself towards your ultimate goal of getting towards one of those top first or second companies that you want to work for.
Right.
So you're building experience, and if something pops and you hit things off and it works, hey, great, they were on your list. So just kind of,
Right.
this way you're not just going applying for things and, ultimately you get experience, but that doesn't really help the folks who spent their time interviewing you.
Yeah, so I think that the point that we're both making, right?
Right.
Although I kind of agree with what you're saying, but the point is you don't want your dream job interview to be like the first interview you go on, right? You want to like
Yeah.
loosen your chop. And again, you also never know which job is going to be that great job anyway. But right, so you need a resume to get in the door, right? You need a resume. So I wanted to talk about some tips for resumes, and let's just see where this conversation goes, right? And I'm actually going to start with some points that are kind of general, and I'm not sharing anything. There's nothing on my screen really to share here.
You let me know when you want me to.
I'm just yeah, I'll tell you. But we're just talking here, right? So
Yep.
let's talk about some general stuff. This isn't even techie stuff, right? But like, what's a good resume, right? What makes a good resume? And you know, I guess the first one I have is a little bit of a question, but like, what do you think about these, like, and I'm going to say sort of like artsy resumes, right? Like, there's the traditional resume, and then some people really try to do something really different with like graphics on there, and I don't even know, right? Just like I've seen some resumes that are really kind of very different. And I sort of have mixed feelings about those. I am personally not sure that it's so helpful to be like super artsy.
Okay.
Um, what do you
I'd
think?
love to
Have you
hear this.
seen
Go
any
ahead.
resumes that are like really unusual?
I, I I've seen them. I've seen more creative resumes go for positions where you're looking for people who are trying to who are going to need to have some kind of creativity around what they do, right? So marketing
Yeah,
folks
exactly.
or people who are doing maybe some kind of graphic design, and that's where I've seen
Right.
the resume kind of take on a presentation and a marketing of that person themselves.
Right. Um, so I mean, that's my first thing is I wouldn't go too out there. Now you don't have to have like and maybe later I'll show some samples. I have this website that has a bunch of sample resumes on it. Maybe we'll talk about them a little bit. But it is nice to be a little different in your resume, right? And have it stand out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the main things you want your resume, you want it to be easy for the person that's reviewing your resume to find what they're looking for, right?
Right.
And quite frankly, a lot of people are used to seeing resumes in a certain format. And to some degree, it might just be helpful for them to be able to find the data where they're expecting it to be, things like that, and not have it be sort of too artsy.
Did you want to show this?
Another tip. What's that?
Did you want to present this?
Um, nah, I don't know. Nah,
Okay.
let's just,
All
I
right.
don't know if we need to.
You let me. You let me
Yeah.
know.
So a couple of other tips, right, that are just like really basic tips, but they need to be said. The reason they need to be said is because I'm telling you, I get resumes that miss the boat here, right? Spell checking, grammar
Yeah.
errors,
Yeah.
typos.
Those are
Please,
huge.
what are you saying to me when I get a resume that has spelling errors on it? It's
Yeah.
it's it's a
Exactly.
no-go right off the bat. It's a no-go. If you can't be careful in the most important thing, which is your career, I mean, one of the most important things, to you, this is your career, and you can't have those kind of mistakes,
Right.
you know,
Yep.
at least not blatant ones, right? I've had people send me their resume as a Word document. And if I open it up in Word and Word is showing me the squigglies, that means it was showing them the squig. Like somehow, I don't understand how they didn't see the same squigglies that I'm seeing, right?
Right.
So, um, so there's a couple things. Um,
Uh-oh.
Great comment from Devin Zara. Can you put that one up?
Yeah. One sec. Flip that around.
Yeah.
Go here.
Hang on, Rich is multitasking over here. Um, so, um, spelling and
Nice.
typos are a real problem, and so thank you for showing us that I agree bad spelling and grammar is the worst thing ever, right? Yeah, great to make a joke about it, but like it's legit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so those are a couple things that are just real basic tips and stuff like that. Another thing to remember is that a lot of big companies use these resume readers. They use like software that scan resumes, and I'll be honest, like that has always made me a little like it's a little weird. I don't. I've never used one, but I know a lot of companies use these things that scan,
Mm-hmm.
and um, and they're looking for keywords. And if a resume doesn't have enough keywords on there, then the resume doesn't get through. Um, and that's kind of tricky because then it gets me thinking about things like acronyms or abbreviations um, versus like the full words of things, right?
Right.
Like for instance, here's an obvious one, but like, I'm just trying to think of a good example of one. Like, um, if you were to say entity framework, or if you were to say EF, right? And I said, oh, I have experience with EF6, or whatever. Or would this checker thing think, oh, well, they didn't mention entity framework 6. They only mentioned EF, like, and not catch it. And um, those things kind of worry me. And this is a case where I'm putting out the question: does anyone know if if those systems are sort of smart enough or whatever, or I guess it depends on the people that drop the keywords into those things.
Right.
But like what about acronyms and things like that? Um, and it's something that sort of always made me nervous back in the day. When I'm like, well, I don't know what I should be using, an acronym, an abbreviation or a full word for things.
Yeah.
Um, you know, um, I don't know if anybody has any knowledge on that, or you, Rich, or anybody in the chat.
Yeah, I
Uh,
don't, but I know. I mean, my comment to that is always spell, especially on a resume, spell things out, right? This way, there's no confusion on what it is that we're talking about, because even within a domain, there can be some ambiguous or overloaded acronyms. So, my recommendation on a resume is to spell it out somewhere, and if you need to use abbreviations to fit things on a within a certain space, then do that following that. But you know
mm,
don't the I think it kind of goes to the common thing you don't want to have on your resume, which is confusion, right? Confusion about what
right.
any of the content that's on there, including things like acronyms.
Right, and that's a good thing because, like you said, sometimes they have multiple meanings, different, So that's an interesting perspective, right? That's good, Um, so we're talking about making it easy to read. You just mentioned that again, right? It should be easy to read. It should be easy to find stuff. So this is a tip that I think goes to people that have more experience. Unfortunately, I know we have some questions about some people that have less experience. But what do you think about like people list sort of old stuff first versus new stuff first? Let me give you an example
Mm,
when I say old stuff, right?
okay.
So how often do you see on a resume, I have experience with SQL Server 2000, comma, 2005, comma, 2007, comma, right? Et cetera, et cetera. And what I really want to know is, do you have experience with SQL Server 2016 or something like that, right? Or are there ways to simplify those kind of statements like SQL, I don't know. I tend to lead with the newer one,
Right.
right?
I mean, yeah, it's in I don't know, reverse chronological order for a resume, right? That's typically how I've always presented it. And I think skills go the same way because you may still know how to you may still know how to code in COBOL, but and in some places that is an important skill you may want to actually highlight and bring it forward, getting to the
Great skill to highlight
discussion
in
of
some places.
yeah.
Yeah. But the
But the
question is, do you want to highlight it? Does it help you in the goal here? Um, As a matter of fact, I've had people say they have something on their resume. Let's just say it was COBOL, right? And I'm making
Yeah.
this up. This is a true story, but I'm interviewing you, Rich. Thanks. I loved your resume, and all your .NET skills are great. But I got to tell you, Rich, now that I see you know COBOL, I got to tell you that we have some COBOL. I'm making this up, right? We got some COBOL stuff that comes up once in a while, and when that comes up, I really it'll be great if we hire you because now I know that you can do some of that work for us. And you
Right.
might be thinking to yourself, I don't want to do that COBOL stuff. Now maybe you do, right?
Yeah.
But if you don't, then don't put it on there, right?
Yeah.
Take it off.
Yeah. I think
Um,
I think that's an awesome point, and I think we forget that, especially as we have a resume where we just maybe add things onto it. We move things down a little bit, put the most recent experience up front, maybe
right.
add a couple of things to that header section. Take a serious look at your resume. Anything that's on there is fair game for an interview to say, "Tell me about this," right?
Right.
So,
Yes. Oh yeah, that's one
yeah.
of my tips on it. Exactly. Tell me about this. But let's not go there yet. Let's hang
Oh,
on
sorry. Okay.
because that's a good one. But let's stay with this because the questions in the chat are: is it important to list every version, etc. Well,
Yep.
is it important to list every version? Is the question to ask, I think. So here's a couple ways of looking at it. First of all, if I didn't put SQL 2000 on my resume, and I only put SQL 2016. I think there's a sequel 2000, right? I don't know. I'm trying to
Yeah.
remember. I think there was sequel 2000. Um, I'm making these products up now. So if that software was scanning and they need SQL Server 2000, and now you don't have it on there because you didn't explicitly list it. So what I think is, and this comes to a tip I was going to talk about later, but you don't have to have one version of your resume,
Mm-hmm.
right? So why not match the resume up to the job description? If you've got the job description, you go to some website and there it is. This is what they're looking for. And it says, I'm looking for someone because let's just say in this fictitious situation, sure, we use SQL Server 2016 for all our new stuff, but we've got a few 2005 servers. Now, this is a bad example because that's way out of support, and Rich
Yeah.
is probably going to blow up if I say I have like a 2005. But just play along. Like
Right.
there's a scenario there, right?
Sure.
And the job posting says we want someone that knows that, and you're like, hey, I know that. Put it on your resume for that job posting because that's what they want to see,
Yeah.
right? A resume. We're not taking this to a print shop anymore, I don't think, and having this
Yeah.
printed, right? It's your resume. You're emailing. You can have 100 copies, 100 versions of this thing if you want to, right? So why not um, leave things on? Like read those job descriptions, read those requirements, and if they're looking for someone with that old version of something, and you think that's going to help you get the job, put it on there. Or I would say leave it off and it could come up in conversation, right? Or maybe there's another way to word it, like, all versions of SQL from such and such to such and such, right? Like there's ways to maybe get around that
Mm-hmm.
because I think a lot of us see that as a way to show like, look, I could put SQL Server 2016 and that might be great. But I want to show people that I've been doing this a while and I've been there and I've seen the old versions, right? And I think there's a real balance that we all have, or like an internal argument of like, should we put more or less on there?
Yeah.
And so, um, so I think that's a good thing. Now, look, the same thing we could talk about .NET framework versions, right? And Richard Wysocki brings that up here. Do
Yep.
you list .NET framework 4.6, 4.7, 3, all these different things? Richard Wysocki mentions .NET Core. I'll tell you something. Here's an interesting example. And we've got Rich here who works at Microsoft, not putting him on the spot or anything like that. This isn't a controversial topic here, right? But
I hope not.
.NET 5 is the .NET version you probably want to have if you're doing like the latest of .NET. You want to say, I know .NET 5. But if you say .NET Core, that triggers something with a lot of people. They think of that's the new one. And
Mm-hmm.
I've had that conversation even with hiring managers that like, no, we don't want .NET Framework. We want .NET Core people. And .NET 5 is .NET Core, right? It is the next version. But it's kind of interesting to say things like .NET Core or something
Right.
like that. I don't. I'm posing that. What do you think?
I think the idea is, you want to, I mean, you have, going to Richard's comment there, you have experienced probably this .NET framework experience, and that's kind of transitioned, where things have moved from being .NET framework, even though it's still supported, to, the work really focusing on .NET Core for all your new stuff. And I think
Mhm.
to show that you're, especially in software business, right? It changes and, continues to move so rapidly, to show that, you're staying up with what's going on and you're not locked into, an older, what is, going to be an older technology going forward. So I think yeah, just being mindful of what the trends are in your industry, whatever it is, software, audiovisual, media,
Right.
what have you.
So I think when you talk about like a .NET version,
Hmm.
I mean, a lot of people have different sections in their resume where you talk about skills, and then we have other sections in our resume where we talk about our past experience and our jobs and things like that. Personally, I would think that if someone highlights that they know .NET 5 or or whatever the latest version is, SQL Server 2016. I don't even know if that's the latest name. It's probably not the. What are we on now? 20. Who knows? 20, yeah, whatever.
That's a good
So
question. See,
so I'm on Azure SQL, honestly. So I don't
that
even
that
know.
was going to be my response. You don't have to know the version; just use Azure SQL, right?
Right. Right. So, but let's just stick with this for example, right? So
Right.
in my highlights at the top of my resume, I'm probably going to say, I know .NET 5, I know SQL 2016. Now, when you look at the resume and I look at this candidate, they said they know .NET 5, and I look down and I go, well, they've had jobs and they've been doing this for 5 years. Let's just say 5 years, right? And at that bottom job, it says they were working with the .NET framework, or it just says .NET, right? Well, okay. Obviously, .NET 5 wasn't around. Like I can see from looking at their resume that they've got the older stuff, but they're highlighting the newer stuff. And I think that's a pattern. But again, the tip is the real good tip here, I think, is build a version of the resume that you want to submit for the job, right? If you can do that. And if that job is simply specifically saying, we need people to support .NET Framework 4.7, then for gosh sakes, put 4.7 on your resume,
Hmm.
if you want to be that specific, right?
Yeah, as long as you have that
Uh,
experience, yeah.
right. Now, Devin Zara brings up, another point. I mean, I see resumes all the time that say Windows 3.1, Windows ME, Windows, like, I don't care, right? And I have a hard time thinking that unless you're going into some desktop support job or something like that, like, give up the Windows part. And, and quite frankly, I don't even put like that I know Windows on there. Like, I don't know if that's really important. Now, we're in a cross platform world. And if I was really comfortable with Linux, maybe then I would say something like Windows, comma Linux, comma iOS. Like I really want to show that I have that diversity or something like that. But
Yeah.
if I'm a and I'm going to generalize here, but if I'm like a classic .NET developer, line of business app developer, in a .NET shop, and and all my stuff shows .NET Framework all across my resume. It's pretty clear that I'm gonna guess that you've been working on Windows machines all these years, right? You know what I mean, Rich? Like, I think it can be implied to some degree without cluttering it up with, old legacy stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I do think, being, like you said, we're getting more and more in, especially with .NET Core being able to run on Linux, and having environments in Azure that are just Linux based. Having that kind of OS experience definitely is important. You know,
Yes.
and again, unless you're a desk side person, probably having the Windows experience, it may or an infrastructure type role may or may not be important.
Right.
I I know, I'm pretty sure, I, I I can't remember when, but I know at some point I pulled that off of my resume as well, and just kind of left the operating systems off and just focused on because if you think about it, there's so much other stuff that takes precedent for us in the developer world that we got to make sure it gets on there, and we don't want to have a 10-page resume. So there, you have to cut things that, obviously you know how to do, but they're just things you know how to do.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So there's some sort of balancing act to like what you want to include, all these different versions of stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, let me throw out a tip that's totally off sort of topic, but I thought this was a good tip, and I think this applies, and I don't want to offend anybody, but this may apply to the younger, college grad, new people entering the workforce. And I saw this as a tip on a website. This was actually, I decided I had a list, a whole bunch of tips for myself. And I was looking at some other stuff today too, just to see. And I thought this was a really good tip that I wouldn't have added on here myself, probably, which is it's sort of about professionalism, right? And setting the, oh my gosh, look, Space Shot is here on the chat. Hello, Space Shot. This is the Dev Talk.
Hello.
Yeah, sorry, Space Shot. You got the wrong channel. Let's see if you can get him. Oh, he says, well, maybe we can get Space Shot on the show.
I'm working on it.
Yeah, cool.
Let me see what I can do.
So the point that was sort of about professionalism and things like that. And again, I don't want to say. I hope most people have enough common sense, but you don't want to put something on your resume that's going to look bad. And if your email was like, some people have like weird email addresses. Now I'm going to make up a completely exaggerated one. But if your email address is drunkenfool@aol.com, because it was really fun. And now obviously it's not going to be AOL.com, right? I mean, I was really joking with that. But yeah, Space Shop puts it in here. Weekend partier at hotmail.com. That might be fun for you and your friends, right? And it might be your nickname from college or whatever. And again, who knows what the reason is, right? But go out and get a new email address and use that on your resume, right? Oh, I can tell you actually a true story that is not this. It's not exactly here. Office Clown GOCs. Chris has got some good ones. So I will tell you a true story without real details. But we got a resume that looked okay. This was years ago. We got a resume, and I think my boss at the time, I was only involved in it. I don't think I was the hiring manager. This is going back a while. My boss and I decided we were calling the person, and we had an appointment to call them. And I guess for whatever reason, they didn't answer the phone. This is not really a resume tip. This is just professionalism. They didn't answer the phone, and it went to their voicemail. And their voicemail message was totally unprofessional, right? It was just like, yo, what up? You got me. Leave me a message. It was just like this silly thing. Like it wasn't like insulting. And if I was friends with the person, I guess I would be like, oh yeah, that's that funny voicemail message. But we looked at each other and we're like, this guy? Like, really? This is the guy? And it left a bad taste in our mouth that, his resume was like, his voicemail, I don't even remember what it was, but it was something like silly. And you're thinking, it kind of goes back to like, if you're looking for a job, think about it like that. You got to step up your game and not allow something silly like that to get in the way of it. That again, off topic. I just thought we'd go into like some sort of sillier tips about, being careful about things. So what else we got? So, what, next on my list was stuff, and I think it goes to maybe some of the stuff, we were talking about a little earlier, but like, be honest.
Yeah.
Right? Don't overstretch. Right? Be honest. I'm not saying you shouldn't embellish. You want to make yourself look good, right? You want to put yourself in the best light here, but you don't want to have. I'm looking at the chat. Space Shot. Chris is all over the chat today, and this is a good one. Well, you know what? Chris says 3 years Windows 11 experience, right? And not only do you see that on resumes, but we see that on job postings too, right?
Yeah,
Looking for
probably
someone
more.
with 5 years experience with .NET 5 or something like that. You know, like there is no 5 years experience with that, right?
Right.
And so, you want to be careful with that. You want to be honest, right? And I think, Rich was talking about this a little bit from a slightly different perspective, but be honest, but don't include stuff that you can't back up, right? And Rich said it before. I think what he said was, if it's on there, be prepared to talk about it.
Yep.
Okay. And I will tell you that it's not uncommon for me to scroll down someone's resume, look for something at a previous position, maybe not their current position, but like even a previous position, find something that looks interesting and say, hey, tell me about that. Right. And I'm not really trying to catch them up. I'm doing it for a reason, because there's something in that previous job that I thought was really interesting. And I'm like, wow, I want to ask them about that. And I've had some times where people were not prepared to answer those questions. I'm not saying they were lying. They might have honestly forgotten, right? It could be like a job from 6 years ago and they had some line item on there that they built some app and you're just like, yeah, like I'm sure they did it, but they can't talk about it.
Right.
So be prepared to talk about these things. Be prepared to back it up. Do a little research on yourself before you go in and look at those things and go, oh, what was that thing? I have it on here. I put it on there like 5 years ago. It was probably important at the time. And let me think about that, and be ready.
Yeah. I think just related to that, in being ready and being able to talk about those things, it's kind of a general tip, not necessarily a resume tip, but the resume can help you go in this direction. When you're having the interview, one of the things that can help, make you memorable and help get some of the points across for what you're trying to get about your skill set is to have, essentially a collection of stories, right? The resume is a listing of those experiences, but how you relay that experience in some kind of a narrative that hopefully resonates with the person that you're conducting the interview with, and potentially many different people. It makes it much more. It gets what you're trying to get across more memorable to the person who's hearing it, because there's you're actually telling a story and not just saying, yep, I got the experience, I did this. And rehearse those stories and know, for those half a dozen stories you might have, the standard list of resume or interview questions, right? When would I pull this story out to best address those questions? And the more you practice and the more prepared you are for those, the easier it is, that the more natural you sound as you start to tell them, even though you may have told them a number of times before.
Yeah, stories is a good thing. And I remember we had that conversation once on a show when we were talking about, I think that was a show we were talking about like interviews specifically and things like that. And it is good to have stories, and your resume does build those stories, right? And one way to do that is to put good stuff on the resume, like quantifiable stuff, I think helps build a story. So, you might say, I have experience building.
Hey, Andy.
I was trying to think of something. What's that?
Look to your left.
I wonder why I'm fuzzy.
Hey.
Fuzzy Wuzzy was a bear. I'm fuzzy.
Yeah. Hello, Chris. So, what I was saying, and I'll just finish this up, and then Chris is fuzzy anyway, so we'll see if he can. But quantifiable stuff. It might be, you might have worked in an organization where you built a lot of websites in the course of a year, right? And so, but you might say, I built websites for clients, right? But what about built 15 websites for clients, right? Or you might say, I build high performance web applications, right? That can handle a load, right? So why not talk about the load? Tell me that we handled 1 million requests a week or something like that, right? Show me, give me the facts, give me those things. Boy, we're going to have conversations about that kind of stuff, right? When you start putting numbers on there. You built 16 web apps for different clients? Wow. Tell me about some of the different ones, right? Let's talk about that. Not just like, built websites or things like that. Now, again, we had people earlier talking about the fact that they don't have a lot of experience. That's okay. I'm not here to say, well, if you don't have 20 examples, then don't put it on there. No, when you're new, maybe you can't put the numbers, right? But you could put other numbers on there. There are other numbers you can put, right? So like, even Chris earlier, we had some comments about talking about events you go to, user groups and things like that, right? So how about I attended 17 in-person events that were networking event. Like, wow, instead of saying I attended some user group meeting, I attended 17 of them. You are showing me that you're committed, right? Use numbers where you can to quantify things.
Yeah, and don't.
Chris, how are you, man?
If you could all can hear me, okay? Is that true? Yeah, I think so.
I hear you.
So I don't discount putting community type activities. I know things have been different for the last 18 plus months or longer, but it wasn't every time. Just to be open, it really depends on if the people you're interviewing with are in touch with this idea of local conferences, wider conferences. Like everybody knows about the big conferences, but you're going to run into either people you interview with or managers who maybe they may not have the time to go themselves, but they at least will be familiar. Like, oh, so you go to the name your local user group here. It doesn't matter what it is. Right. Maybe we live in the Philadelphia region. Oh, you go to the Philadelphia Docker user group. Really? I've never been to it. And just some people will look at that and say, yeah, this person, they enjoy learning. They enjoy meeting other technologists. And that can be seen as a strength, that you're hungry. And I really want to avoid the idea, because, this is a topic of conversation that comes a lot. So notice what I'm not saying is the person who spends all their free time on side projects and code and hustling, right? Because certainly you need to have your own time. So I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying that kind of activity sets you apart, because many people in this industry, and I'm not trying to criticize them either. We all have to do what we have to do, but they're not going to have those attendance at events or just the fact that they're even interested and they pay attention to what's going on at local networking opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we talked about some of that stuff earlier, right? We were, what were you going to say, Rich? Did I hear you starting to say something?
Yeah, I was going to just kind of tag onto that, because Devin Zara asked a question about, where do you find those local user groups? I know for us, Meetup has been the popular way of finding those, especially when we think about technology, but all kinds of different interests. I think even there's a arm, it might be the .NET Foundation, or there's a group that basically sponsors a lot of local user group accounts on Meetup.
Right.
And basically,
that's right. .NET Foundation does do that. Okay, but
cool.
I don't know if Meetup is an international thing or a local thing. I don't know where Devins are, where in the world you are. So I think how would we find out about user groups might be different depending on where you live, right? If you live in the U.S., I think Rich is dead on. Like Meetup is a great way these days. It wasn't always the case, but wow, it's like the de facto place. But if you're in Europe or something, or Asia, I don't know, or South America, right? Is Meetup? It's probably pretty big now, but I don't know.
Oh, actually, West Virginia. We have some friends in West Virginia. We have like Jeremy Sinclair is an MVP in West Virginia, and surely he must be part of a community. I wonder if I reach out to him, it'd be interesting. You know what I think might be an interesting shot in the dark here is searching for user groups by locale on a place like YouTube, because in the last 2 years, we're seeing more groups out of necessity recording and publishing things. I've learned about a ton of user groups I didn't know exist all over the world, just because, and now not by directly searching for them, but by searching for something else.
Right.
and then going like, oh, look, there was a talk on something at the UK Birmingham user group, and then I watch it, and if what's really cool is I didn't have to get on a plane and fly to the United Kingdom. Not the United Kingdom sounds like a great place to visit, but I got to just sit and watch it. So I wonder, I wonder
Yeah, that's
if
not a bad idea.
in these days, just to see. But we do know of some folks in that area. I I imagine that it might seem like, oh, I'm out here alone, but I know there are MVPs from that area. So certainly
Well,
there
that's
must be
assuming
some.
that Devin Zara is a Microsoft developer. I don't
No,
know
I
if
agree.
that's.
No.
But
Yeah.
I guess what I'm getting at more is just that there must be some.
Yes. There are places, and there's online communities. I mean, nowadays, because of COVID, in particular, you don't need to be near a user group. It doesn't matter that there's a group in your area. You have tuning into the Dev Talk Show, right? You're tuning into whatever other live things are happening, right? But I don't know. We're kind of going off topic a little bit.
I think it's a good point. Like the Charleston, West Virginia Android Developers Group is apparently in Charleston, West Virginia. I admit that it might take a little work. I wish I could say like I know exactly where to send you,
Mm-hmm.
but and I know it's not necessarily resume based, but interesting.
So, we were talking about some other tips. So where were we? I'm just looking at my list. I have a little bit of like a cheat sheet list that I had from earlier stuff. We were just talking about, being prepared to talk about things. We also talked, Chris, you missed this, but, we also talked about don't put things on your resume that you don't want to highlight, that you don't want to talk about, right? That's always a good one. And I had even given the tip about having multiple copies of a resume based on the particular job you're going for. Even as far as saying, hey, if you read the job description of what they're looking for and you have that experience, but you just thought it wasn't something that you wanted to clutter up your resume with for other jobs, like have multiple versions and stuff like that. So we could talk a little bit about some stuff that goes on. I think Rich started on this topic earlier about the size of a resume, or like how much do you want to have on there? And it seems that, common wisdom is that a resume should be one page. I tell you what, people seem to really say a one-page resume is a great resume. I think if you've been at it a while, it gets kind of hard. And so a two-page resume, they say sort of 2 to 3 at the max. So when you start doing 4, 5 pages, it's time to start trimming stuff down, because, it's great that you have 20, 25, 30 years experience or whatever like that. But, you got to find a way to sort of like summarize that a bit.
Yeah.
And bring that down. Now, one of the things, so this brings up a question, and this is what I really want to ask you guys, is for a long time, I was always told not to have gaps in a resume, right? Like it should show everything. But I read some articles that say, yeah, but you can leave certain jobs off the resume, right? Like if you don't feel like they're pertinent or something like that. You guys have any thoughts on that concept?
I think you have to.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I mean, my 2 cents is, my thoughts around that is, yeah, if you can avoid having gaps, that's fine. I think at some point though, you do kind of cut off how far back you might go, getting into that 2 to 3 pages worth of stuff. And if they really want the archives, they can go to LinkedIn and see all the previous stuff you did, back in the, however far back you want to go. But I think there's some goodness that can come out of a conversation that where you did something else just to bridge a gap.
Oh yeah. That's why I'm having trouble with that advice. When I read that advice, I was doing research for this, and they talk about like leaving things out. And I'm like, I don't know. When I'm hiring people, when I see a gap, that also sometimes is like a flag that says like, whoa, what was going on here? Like.
Yeah.
But
traditionally, it meant that.
Like,
yeah. I think
Yeah.
traditionally, a gap was a red flag. I remember getting that advice. I have caught myself looking for gaps myself.
Mm-hmm.
I am trying to be more open-minded, and this is not just because of the era of COVID. I'm trying to be more open-minded that a gap may not signal that the person was unemployable or, I don't know, fired. There could be something else going on. I mean, heck, for all we know, maybe a birth of a child, starting a family, and took some time away for that, or some other kind of care situation that I don't even really have the right to ask about. So I'm trying to be more open-minded about that. And I really like what you said, Rich. I've never considered this, but what a great idea. If you are going to leave a gap because you would otherwise have a lengthy resume, but you want to indicate that there is a complete employment experience, then yeah, and maybe I wonder of a notation at the end that says complete employment history available at LinkedIn with the link. Something that I
that's a
wouldn't
cool
have
idea.
done.
Or even available upon request. Like if you really want to see the whole detail, we'll send it along. But I'm trying to make it easy for you to read this thing quickly, right?
I'm trying to pick the relevant experience for you. I'm trying to not, like, for example, right? Let me tell you about some things I've done in the past. I've written ActiveX controls in C++ that were going to be consumed by VB programmers.
Wow.
I mean, do I really need that on my resume? If someone wants to talk war stories in an interview, which happens, I'm happy to talk about the good old days, right?
Right.
But it doesn't need to be on my resume.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, we were talking a lot about like just leaving stuff off. Like it's just, if it's not helping you get the job, like you said, I think that there's a story from the whole resume, Chris, right? And I think this is what you're getting at too, is like at the top of your resume, it says you do .NET 5 on Azure, right? And for your resume, I see these jobs. You've been at this thing for 10 years and this one for 5 years. Again, here, sorry, people, we're talking about some of us older people that have like longer history, but you've been doing this for 10, 15, 20 years, let's just say, right? I know deep down you did other stuff. .NET Core and Azure wasn't around 20 years ago. Like, I know you did other stuff, Chris. We'll probably have a conversation like, wow, tell me what kind of cool stuff you're working on. But is it helping the resume that you did it? Like, maybe not, right? I mean, it might be. These are subjective, Chris. You missed my initial disclaimer. My initial disclaimer on this whole thing is these are opinions. And every person that reads a resume is a different person. And another person might just be like, I love to see that they did Fortran and COBOL, or that they started on, Angular, the original Angular. I don't even have to date ourselves back to Fortran. Like I want to see that old stuff. Like people want to see it. Some people do, some people don't, right? But I think what we're getting at, the point of what we're getting at here, and I think Rich made this point earlier, is that a resume should be readable, right? We got to make it easy for a hiring manager to get what they want out of the resume, right? One of the things I like to tell people to leave off a resume is, and I see this sometimes, not always, there's a difference between explaining what you do, so versus explaining the company I work at, right? So I might be a software developer, and I'm going to talk about the software developer stuff I do. But I also see things like people put in a description like, I work at Nike. Nike is an international manufacturer of sneakers. And of course, pretend we don't know who Nike is. Like, not every company's that obvious. But do I need a paragraph on what the company does? Founded in 2002, this company has been providing healthcare services to, blah, 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 blah. Like, I think that's, unless you're trying to show experience in an industry, which can be really important. So again, what are you trying to do with this resume? But in general, I think like leave that stuff out. But this is my opinion. Do you want to see that kind of stuff? Does that help you at all?
I think you're right that, and Nike is an interesting example because you've picked a corporation that people know just by the name.
No, but that was a bad example. Just pretend it's a company that you don't know.
Let's try it. Right. Let's try a different example. Right. Like I worked for a company here in the southeast region of Pennsylvania that is, you know, a B2B business to business type company. Your average consumer is not going to see commercials for it on TV, but they're big in a certain industry, and I mean, after one sentence, just because if it's going to set some context for the work you did. So, for example, at the time, I did a lot of work that related to multidimensional analysis and reporting websites that like displayed these graphs and charts and things with all the authentication bells and whistles and stuff. So the little bit of context that the company I worked for was a end-to-end commercial loan processing vendor. That little bit of context is nice, but I don't need to sell you anymore on the company. It just makes sense that like, oh, so it would make sense that your company would provide analytics and reporting. And then if they said, well, what else do they do? This, oh, they did a bunch of other stuff, but this was where I worked. I worked in the analytics and reporting.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And if you're trying to show experience in an industry, then by all means it might be helpful. Like some people want to do, you've been a software developer in pharmaceutical for whatever reason, you want to stay in that industry. I would also think that those recruiters would recognize the names of their competitors and things like that as well. So there's a lot of ways of looking at it. But you can also put it into the description of like, maybe the text of like what you did. I built 5 web-based applications to calculate the risk of such and such, and that's going to sort of or like I built a stock trading application for this, and you worked at that company. Well, I have a feeling it's a financial company. You just said, I didn't recognize the name of the company, but you said, I built an application that does stock trading, right? So like, there's other ways to get that out there. And I think that's also what, what you're getting at, right?
Right. Yeah, I'm not presenting it to you for the purposes of you loving the company. Now, certainly there are some companies that it may wow someone. And here's the flip side of that. I think this is the easier pivot. You worked for one of the big tech companies located in places like Silicon Valley and up in the Seattle area, right?
Yeah.
There is a certain cachet to that may or may not be useful. But then again, you don't have to say what they do, right? Everybody's going to know when they see it.
Yeah, in those cases, if you say, I work
at Microsoft, who doesn't know, right? You're probably applying for a job in that developer space anyway. I don't know. But let me pivot just real quick. So here's something that actually did help me, but I didn't know it. I didn't know it until I started. And one of the gentlemen who interviewed me, we went out to lunch one day, and he was just so impressed by that. He had to tell me that he was impressed by this. Like he was compelled to say, like, God, I really thought we should bring you on because of this. So one of my first jobs is I worked for a company that was building like a music entertainment sort of business before we had music devices that took over the world with music stores and MP3s and all that stuff. So we're at the phase just before that. And we built a product that was in the Disney parks in the US called Disneyland Forever, Walt Disney World Forever. I can freely talk about it. The product doesn't exist anymore, but it was one of the most fun things I ever did. And we also put our product into Barnes & Noble's music sections. Now, I put on the resume that I did this work. I said technically what it was. And I did say that the product went into the Disney parks and into the Barnes & Noble retail locations nationwide. And what this gentleman told me one day is he said, I was so impressed. Like, if he can do work that Disney and Barnes and Noble loves, then it's got to be great for us. And I said, I never even considered that angle when I wrote that in there. The only reason I wrote it in was to just try to very quickly give this idea of like, hey, this product was at the Disney parks. Just some context. You know what that means. You understand that it's public facing. People are banging on it and whatever, and it's being, and we're still servicing it, or that it was in a retail environment. So that tells you what it's in a hostile environment, right? Retail kiosks that are just sitting. This is a little pre-internet-ish of today. So these things are getting beaten on by customers, and who knows what's happening to them, and people are stealing the keyboards, or they're taking keyboards to Barnes and Noble locations and trying to plug them in and seeing if they could hack in. I felt like I was providing this context just in a couple sentences, but this particular person who interviewed me took it a different way of like, man, you service those big names. And I thought, oh, wow, I never even thought of that, right? I never even thought of the value. I mean,
people are impressed. People are impressed by stuff like that, and it's interesting. It had some value, right? So yeah, I mean, that's the cachet of like a recognizable name, right? And there is some value in that. There's a perceived quality that goes along with that. If a company has that reputation, like let's say Disney, right? They have a reputation for being thorough and attention to detail and things like that, right? So you would think, and again, that's just my perception of Disney. I think it's like a commonly held, you may hate Disney if you're watching this now, and I'm sorry if you do, right? But you might, buy into that model that, Disney has sort of set up for themselves. And so that would give you value. Like that's transferable or whatever. There's a term for that, right? Where that rubs off on you that you worked there, you must be good at this, right? And so those are good things to put on a resume, right? Like let's just change the context of your comment a little bit, and let's talk about. And I want to get on. There's some really good stuff in the chat here, but
yeah, absolutely.
Is it okay to name drop, so to speak, within an interview or a resume? And I think when it's done carefully, like you kind of name drop in Disney, right? But
yeah,
you weren't like doing it in a bragging way, but you got it in there, right? And I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that's a little bit of a sales tool, even though you didn't do it that way on purpose. I think that strategically could be a wise thing to do, for a resume. Personally, I think it works, right?
Yeah, I think so. Much to the just one last thing. Much to the. Yeah, it helps you much in the way that Chris explained it, right? Not that you did anything other than try and tell what it was that you worked on, but the perception from the person on the other side of the table was like, wow, they're big companies, and you must have done some awesome stuff. So like you said, I think if you do it the right way, it can work for you.
Yeah. Now the key is,
yeah.
I was going to say the key is okay. So that sounded cool. Those couple sentences. If it came to it, I could describe those systems, the technology that I worked on, what was my piece, which is important. It's one thing to be able to describe the system, but you've got to be able to say what was your role, both from a technology perspective, but also like, did you play a leadership role? What did you own? Like in the case of Disneyland Forever, it came to a day where I owned the product. Like it was me. It was my decisions. So I was able to say that confidently, that I made the technology choices for one specific upgrade, and I could speak to them. And I think that could like, hey, you made these choices and you got it executed and it got delivered on time. And I also was able to tell a story of like, hey, Disney creates these events for their guests. The 33rd anniversary of the Pirates of the Caribbean ride. Well, guess what? That's on a certain day. So when they ask for Disneyland Forever to have the music from Pirates of the Caribbean in a 33rd anniversary edition available on the kiosk, you have a deadline. There's no missing it.
Right.
That's
a valuable story, right?
Yeah. So I actually want to come back to this topic because I want to get to something that was in the chat, but I want to come back to this topic of I'm writing it down in my notes here. I want to be able to. I'm going to put a pin in this about explaining your contribution because I really want to come back to this because I see a lot of resumes like what you were talking about, where people put this like sort of bold statement, like worked on a team that created the greatest website ever made, something like that. And is that, but what was their contribution? But let's come back to that, right? If you don't mind, because there's some good comments in the chat. And it started with.
Do you want me to bring that one up? I think I know the one.
YouTube comment from Neil Malapalli, if I'm saying that correctly. And they're saying, how do you feel about someone mentioning skills? C#, 90%, SQL, 50%. My take is you can't qualify skills. What is 90%? Love to hear your thoughts, right? And then there were some other comments in there from other people sort of in response to that. Mm-hmm. So the 90% one maybe throws me off a little bit because that's a vague thing. I have seen people put things in there where they're trying to justify, and to some degree I can appreciate it because they're willing to say, on their resume they might list like 10 skills and they'll say, on number 1, I consider myself a beginner. On number 2, I consider myself advanced. On number 3, I consider myself intermediate. And on number 4, I'm a beginner, right? And I've seen that, right? And I think if it's done well, I've actually found it sort of refreshing to some degree to see that, because they're at the same time as they're promoting certain skills, they're also saying, listen, you're going to see CSS on my resume, and I can do CSS, but I'm kind of hacking my way through it, and I'm admitting it. Like, I'm comfortable with it. I'm going to say I'm a beginner on CSS, right? I'm going to put, sure, I've done Angular on my resume, but am I really like a pro at it? No, right? And I think if you balance it out enough, and it does sort of say, wow, the ones that they're calling themselves, let's say, an expert on, they're sort of ranking themselves. And what does that mean? Who the heck knows? It's completely abstract. It's completely their opinion. But it does sort of say, like, okay, these are the skills that they think they're best at. And they're trying to give you some context around that. I kind of think it's helpful. Don't get me wrong. I'm going to challenge some of that in an interview. All right. Oh, okay. These are your skills that you're better at. Well, in the interview, you're going to have to show that you are better at those than the others. But I love that comment, right? And I think it's an interesting concept. What do you guys think? Rich, have you seen that done?
And this is that time where I look blankly in the camera and say, I'm sorry, I was off prepping something else.
Well, I'm just trying to. So, Chris.
Sorry, could you roll that back?
Chris,
go ahead.
So let me be fair, right? My strategy's changed over the years, and I want to make it clear it's not necessarily because I knew what I was doing. Sometimes I just tried something else. Sometimes I got scared to try something else. I have at times built a resume where I have divided skills up in terms of like proficient, familiar with. I believe I've refrained from saying expert. That may say a little more about me than it does about whether you should do that. But it also might be, you might want to be careful because somebody, I don't know that this will really happen to you. But what if you say you're an expert in C# and you just happen to be sitting across somebody who maybe wrote a book on the subject? And they decide, I don't even know if this is the right thing and that they should do this, but they're like, oh yeah, expert, huh? And they just, you start getting quizzed on some esoteric stuff that's like, really, is this what we do every day with the language? So I have done that. I have also not done that. I've also just listed skills and just, each box was the same size. And I even tried to make the columns look like they were about the same text width because I didn't want your eyes going any one way. But when I say that, let me also be clear that I do believe, again, this is not about lying or falsehood at all, about making sure you highlight the skills that it's clear the employer wants you to use when you get there. Sure. It's okay that you might want to grow, but if you're applying for a job where they say, we use React and you have React experience, it's going to be near the top. I'm going to make sure you see that. And I'm going to make sure that you know that I think I'm pretty good at it, that I can jump into an application and I can contribute. I've got to find a way to get that across to you. As far as scoring the abilities, I just think you're asking for someone to wonder, like, well, what's your definition of a 7? What's my definition of a 7?
Right. And there's no way to.
Yeah. I don't think the proficient and familiar with is bad, but maybe avoid.
No, I like that breakdown, Chris.
Yeah.
I like what you're using a word that I think has a lot of value there, proficient, right? Because I think, to me, what that means is this person's not saying they're an expert at this. They're saying that they can use this, at least in their opinion. I'm reading that and I'm saying, okay, this is someone who feels that they can use this in their day-to-day job. Like, this is something that they've got skills in. They're not saying they're the greatest. But when you're then you're also showing that you have familiarity with other things. And I can respect, when I'm reading the resume, I can respect that you're sort of saying, hey, I'm not trying to mislead you. I'm putting this thing on my resume because I know it. I've dabbled in it. But the problem is, if you don't categorize these things, and I don't think I've ever categorized these on my resumes in the past, but I do like the idea, right? But I haven't done it. I've always left them sort of flat in the same list. And by doing that, when you flatten them, then you're almost implying that, you know, all those skills are the same level. And so you can't be honest and say, oh, I'm familiar with certain things, because that right off the bat implies that other category you must be more than familiar with, or something like that, right? Like, how do you define that? Expert is a loaded term. If you say expert, or if you say a 10, you know, out of 10, I've told you guys this before. I'm bringing it in the interview. Like, you're getting the hard question. You know, you better know all the answers if you're saying you're an expert at something. Advanced is even better than expert, if you ask me. Like, okay, advanced. You're saying you're maybe better than the average or something. But I like your designation a lot, Chris. Proficient and familiar. Is that what you'd said?
I've used that. I've also gotten away from it. Like, it's how do I feel that time? I'm certainly no expert resume writer. I don't have a
And listen, but we're trying to get that job.
We're just giving you experience, right? And
we're trying to get that job, and you might want to not downplay some of those skills, right? And you're gonna hope that that's gonna work out for you. Yeah. But I think what we're saying, though, is to be really specific, like this 90% or 50% or an 8 out of 10 or whatever that is probably getting a little too specific, right?
Right. And now that I've had a chance to kind of catch up and hear the question, I think where I think in my mind, I would stay away from that. And the reason for that is something we talked about early on, is like, don't put any ambiguities into your resume, right? Well, what does that mean? One person's 8 out of 10 is another person's, whatever. Don't let the resume get you out of a position before you have a chance to talk to somebody about it, right? And ambiguous things can often do that.
Yeah. So here's a place where it could hurt you as well. Now, I don't know if you consider Chris's 2 categories ambiguous, but how about this? I've had times where I've been interviewing people and I say, oh, I see you have this thing on your resume, Windows 3.1, joking around. Like, that's what we were talking about before. I see you have Windows 3.1 on your resume, and you tell me you're just, not that, but how much do you know about that? And they say, I really don't know much about it, right? So I start asking questions, and I start to find out that they actually really do know a lot about it, but maybe there's imposter syndrome going on here, like that came up in the thing before. They might not think they're good. So Chris, going back to your example, you said, I'm familiar with, I don't know, NuGet packages. I'm just throwing a topic in here. I'm familiar with NuGet packages, right? And then I might find out from asking you, like, man, Chris, your version of familiar is you know more about it, and I thought I was sort of advanced. You know what I mean? And so
Sure.
we could potentially sell ourselves short by saying familiar. You know, right? So this is where there's like not really a right answer to these questions. Am I right?
Yeah.
Like, am I right? There's the right
I
answer. Or was that
I
a
think
wrong answer?
maybe the value that we can provide to folks that are both have as much experience as we do, but folks a lot younger, is the feeling we get on the other side of the table when you have been asked, or maybe it's your role to hire. But even if it's not your role to make the hiring decision, oftentimes as a developer, you're asked, "Hey, go. We have somebody we're going to interview later. I'd like for you to talk to them and tell us what you think." Getting that perspective of how I felt on the other side of the table, I think is the most value I can provide you, because I'm doing exactly, I'm looking at this sheet of paper that to me is blank 5 minutes ago, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, what am I going to ask this person? What am I getting from this? Um, and I want to get the most out of that interview. Like, it's so important to me that I want to really make sure I give the person the best chance to put their best foot forward. And sometimes that's as much my fault if they don't, because I just didn't figure out how to ask. I know we can say all we want, like, well, they should be able to, but not everyone's the same personality type. And you can really miss out on a great developer who just isn't a great salesperson, but they're a great developer. So
Yeah, and I think we again, not that we can't have that conversation again, but I feel like, months ago we talked about like interviews, and I think we, touched upon that, and it's such an important skill of an interviewer. One of the things I try to impress upon my managers is how important it is for you to make the candidate, like, put them in the position to show you the best that they have, right? Not to intimidate them. And like you said, not everybody has the skill. Listen, let's apply this to resumes, because not that I'm squashing this, right? But the same thing goes for a resume. You might not be good at writing a resume. So ask other people for advice, right? Like, you might not be good at an interview. So you would hope that the interviewer is gonna help you with that, but you would do mock interviews. We talked about that in the past. Well, your resume, get some help on that resume,
yeah,
right? You might
yeah,
not be good. You might, let people read it. Let people that read it. They might be like, I think you're being a little hard on yourself. You're way better at this skill. Like, oh, really? Okay. I don't know. It just kind of made me
wouldn't that
think.
be something? Wouldn't that be something if some very brave people wanted some feedback on resumes, and we could help them in a very fair, non, a safe and certainly safety just in terms of privacy, but just emotionally safe way. That I'm not sure how to do that. I don't want to say that yes, that's our next show, but an interesting idea to chew on. Um, Maybe help people, not just that, but even say like, hey, here's a question you might get in an interview. What might your answer be? And just help, right? We're not here to judge. We're here to help because we want you to get the job. And
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I was
I
just
know.
going to throw out to
Yeah.
Devin Zara had this comment about feeling like they're going to fail hard when they start doing interviews. And I was about to offer something, and I'm like, I don't even know if we have a way to do that. We should say, you know what? Come on this show. We'll interview you. You know what I mean? Like, can we do a mock interview? Like, I would help people with a mock interview. If someone wants to do that, I would say, hey, I'll interview you. Like, and I might not know the skills that you're even talking about, right? But I don't know. I'm a .NET guy. Like, you might not be doing .NET work, but I would. There are people that other people that would help you as well. But I think, if you're worried about going into an interview and you think you're going to fail hard, and it made me a little sad to see that, honestly, because quite frankly, from the chat, you don't seem like a recluse
Oh,
at all, right? But maybe
being
chat is different, right?
yeah,
Chat's a whole
that's
different
true.
ball game. But and I would offer to do, a half hour on the phone with somebody and do a mock interview. Happy to help out, and I would do it even on the show. It would be kind of a fun thing to do, but that might really embarrass people to, have
Sure.
to answer
No, I
questions
understand. You got to
on
be a little careful, right? So
yeah.
I'm curious, and I don't want to try to rehash something maybe that was covered. It's super easy for us to talk about building that resume with experience. and so hard when you are trying to get the first job in this industry, right? Like, what does your resume look like? Is it just education? I don't know if you covered this already.
Well, we did. We actually
So
we kind of started there because some questions came in like right off the bat in chat.
yeah,
I wasn't planning on going there, right? But at least not at the moment. But we said, well, hey, listen, it's hot. It's in the chat. We did talk about that. I mean, you know, we could rehash that briefly. I don't know if we want to
I
beat
think
it
if you
down,
did
but
that,
people come and go out of these streams, and somebody could be
yeah,
watching now that wasn't even here in the beginning.
sure.
And it's
Yeah.
an important topic.
Yeah, and I think there might be, because I think there were a couple of things we didn't hit on that, you know, I just kind of put aside. But Chris, go ahead if you want to jump into that, because I think it would be worth mentioning.
Oh, well, first of all, I sympathize because it's hard. I empathize with how difficult it is to get that job when the fear is everybody wants experience, but how do I get experience? We've all said it. We all said it to ourselves.
Yep.
If and boy, I've gone on and talked so much about how I don't want you to do all this side hustling and to make it everything all your waking moments. But if you can find a way, even for your first job, to show something related, some kind of experience, it could be that if you're in university, were you able to be some kind of teaching assistant? Could you volunteer some time maybe teaching middle schoolers? A lot of times those workshops are built for you. And it can be and I'm not trying to say that that's because you're going to lie about it. It can be about the subject, but even if you know a subject really well, like a language or something, putting together that kind of workshop is an extraordinary amount of time. So just volunteer to teach it. Take the experience, take the knowledge you have, take the pre-prepared workshop, teach it to some middle schoolers. And again, I'm talking about the person I don't expect job experience because you are coming out into this job market from however you got here. So what else can you show? This isn't for everyone. Start a blog. If you do very much like to learn by building your own side things, get them on GitHub. And if you're the type of person comfortable doing this, talk about it a little bit on a YouTube channel. I'm not saying that the interviewer or hiring manager is going to go pour over all that stuff, but it will stand out that in this pile of resumes where, okay, coming out of university, 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 and teaches middle school workshops. Oh, and they have a blog. Let me type in the web address. They do have a blog. And look, they have a YouTube channel. And yeah, there's 10 videos on here about getting started with Git source control. Great. That resume is going to be valued now. It sounds so much like side hustling, so I'm sorry because I don't want to say that.
A side hustle. Include the side hustle too. Like, I don't care if you're a web developer and you made going back to basket weaving, right? Your aunt does basket weaving and you created a website for her to promote her basket weaving. That's a project.
Right. Oh, no, you're right. It's just that I don't want to give an impression that I'm one of those people that says like eat, sleep, and dream code because it's the only way. And
well, it's not the only way, but let's talk about in a competitive environment. If you have the ability, listen, you could be coming out of college or whatever, or employed and have 3 kids and debt, and you're working and doing what you can to do, right? And you don't have time to go out there and go to the user group. And I hear you and I respect that. And I know it's really easy for us to sit here and go, oh, go do user groups or go, find opportunities for yourself. Like we know that, right? I don't want to be disrespectful. On the flip side, anything you can do. Chris, you said you don't want to make people feel that they can eat, breathe, and sleep software development or whatever it is that you're trying to find a job in. And that is true. But let me say the opposite, is that if you have the opportunity to show that, hey, I've got free time, I'm going to show I am going to eat, sleep, and breathe software to show these people that I'm worthy of the job, then I think it's a good thing to do too. right? And I'm not trying to overstate it. I'm not trying to say you have to, but what can you do? What can you do to distinguish yourself from other people, right? And you have to do whatever you can to, I think, to distinguish yourself from other people, right? If you can. And if you can't, then there's other ways. There's other things to think about, right? Some people have kids and don't have the time to, you're going to school and you don't have time to do stuff at 3 o'clock in the morning, writing practice software. We get it, right? What else can we do? There's always another idea. There's always another thing to do, right?
Yeah, but I do think those are some out of the box. Maybe they're outside the box, so worried about like, well, I don't have job experience. Well, okay. What have you done in this space that you get on your resume? I mean, look, the resume isn't going to have job experience. So it's not like this is a shock to the interviewer. They should be hiring you for the appropriate entry-level position. Right. That's okay. Sometimes it's harder to get the second job because now there is experience attached. sometimes that's a harder hill to climb.
Yeah, it gets hard. You get the first job, and especially if it's not in the tech you want, that's a challenge right there, Chris. Right? I had that when I got started, and the company I was working for was pushing me in a direction that wasn't really where I wanted to go because that's what the work they had for me at the time, And I'm like, okay, so now the stuff I have on my resume, it's experience and it's tech. I'd be honest, I'll tell you, it was like data warehouse work, which I wasn't interested in at the time. Like it was good, and there was good money in it at the time, but I kept getting put on these projects to do like ETL stuff, and that's just not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do web development. And so I sort of had a different problem there, Chris, right? Where the stuff that was on my resume was sort of kept pushing me in another path. That was tricky too. That was a tricky situation to navigate. I don't know. Does that sound familiar to anybody?
No.
Or am I the only one with that one?
No, it is. It is. It's I think I've been super fortunate that I've maybe not had to fight as hard as some folks, especially considering I fell a little bit into some early jobs. Just right place, right time, right interest. So that's good. They found somebody who was more than happy to want to work very hard for the Disney park in Anaheim because I that was an important special place to me. So
yeah. Hey,
it's not work at all.
Rich threw out a topic earlier.
Yeah.
And I put a pin in it. I said I wanted to come back to this one. And I'm trying to get it back in my head exactly. I wrote down explain your contribution, right?
Isn't that the 10% that we went through?
No, I don't think it was. I think we were talking about well, it's sort of like the opposite of the name dropping, right? Like it's easy to say, oh, I worked I worked at Microsoft on the Windows team or something like that. You're like, wow, right? Mm-hmm. And and don't get me wrong, I'm sure anyone who does that, like I'm not trying to knock, I'm just trying to think of like a product that's like really well known that has like, wow, right? But you want to be sort of clear that your contribution was a sort of small part of that. Like you didn't write Windows, right? You contributed to it, but you don't want to like sort of overstate. I've had people sort of overstate things like, worked on a team where we built 15 web applications. Here's a better example that I was trying to think of one with this Windows thing. It wasn't really going anywhere. So worked on a team where we built 15 web applications a year. Okay. How many web applications did you build? Well, I built one, but the team built 15. And to me, that's a little sketchy when we're going to get into the details, right? Now, when you're new, there's a different tolerance for that kind of stuff, right? when you, I admit, and maybe you guys think I'm wrong about this. When you don't have a lot of experience and you're trying to like make things sound interesting, you could say, well, no, I only did one of them. But I'll tell you what, I learned a lot from being in the room when they were making all those other applications, right? Like there's a way to, if there's stuff you can gain from that, use it to your advantage.
Right.
But I do find that like when I start to interview people and they say, they worked on, especially when it comes to new technology. And then I start to ask, and in the details, I find out that they really didn't have a big hand in the thing that they're trying to make out to be a bigger thing. That's a turnoff to me in an interview process.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, and I could see it being an easy thing, especially for folks newer in the industry to, like, they're really proud of what was accomplished, but you need to know what their contribution was. And I'm not even trying to say the person's being totally disingenuous and trying to pull the wool over your eyes, but it's just not what you're there to find out. Like, okay, that's great that the team did this. What did you do? And so I think that's a good piece of advice that I bet you I'm sure I got wrong.
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know if you agree, but I feel like personally, as an interviewer, my tolerance for those kind of things, that kind of stretching a little bit, is way higher. My tolerance is way higher for someone that's new, right? Because like I get it, you're trying to build up your resume. You want to show that you've been a part of things that are bigger than you are, right? And that's okay. But when someone's experienced and they've got and they're just really stretching things like I don't know, it's a little bit of a turnoff to me. Maybe a lot of a turnoff, I guess.
Yeah.
And so it kind of comes back to like being able to back up and be prepared to answer questions about these things that are on your resume, right? Because Rich, we talked about that earlier.
Yeah, and I think you have to be able to support whatever's on there and be able to have a conversation about it. I think the other thing is, look, if your experience if that's what your experience is, that's what it is, and it is two things, right? Part of it is a little bit of a part of it is a little bit of a wake up call for yourself and say, all right, well, what else can I do outside of this, or what other experiences have I not thought of that might go into this, right? May not be a job related in tech, but I'm sure going through high school, college, whatever, there were other work that was done, and those things can be relatable, especially if they're things that are related to working with customers or working in teams or things of that nature. So look for those kind of opportunities to at least be able to talk about those, again, creating those stories. But I think the other side of it is, being real with yourself and think, well, what else can I do that, in the meantime, to augment some of those things? What other experiences can I get? And that goes back to all the other things we kind of led off with around working on GitHub projects or working on, working on open source type things. So yeah, it's, if that's what it is, and it's a little bit of a gut check as well to say, well, what can I do to improve myself, while I'm going through this process?
Right. Yeah. I guess it kind of goes into the like, what do you put on the resume? What do you leave off the resume? We're talking about leaving things off, when you have a lot of experience. When you're a beginner, I mean, I don't think you leave anything off the resume. I've had people leave stuff off resumes, and I was shocked when I found out what they left off the resume. For example, like someone who, had like a gap in their resume, for certain years. And I'm like, well, what was going on? You're like, well, I didn't put it down. I was in the military and something. And I'm like, you left off your resume that you were in the military? Right. I'm like, you had a job for 4 years or whatever it was that you did. Like, how is that not? Of course that's relevant, or whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
I just think like, especially when your resume is small, right? Like, you don't know what's interesting to other people. So, whatever, be prepared to talk about it, but don't leave things off that could be interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, that's a lot of, I think we talked about like a lot of areas.
Could easily go on for
tip,
hours and hours and hours, right? Easily.
Yeah, another good. Let me just throw out one more simple tip, because I had a couple simple tips earlier, right? That are just good all-purpose resume things, right? I saw this one online too. Some of these simple ones I got from a list, and I'm like, oh, this is a good tip. Don't name your resume resume.pdf and send it to somebody, right? You're just making it harder for them. They got to rename it when they save it. Like, use your initial and your name, or your name, Andy Schwamm resume dot PDF or .doc. You know what I mean? Like, right? Actually, don't use a doc. Don't send docs. Send PDFs. Right? Is another good thing to do. But because you run into formatting problems with doc. What do you think about like a simple tip like that though? Name the resume. Make it easy for the person that's getting your resume.
I agree.
I think I stumbled into that by dumb luck. Never thought about it that way. I just think that probably way back in the day, the first time that I saved it, and it did happen to be in Word, I think Word suggested to me the name Chris Gomez's resume, and I just went, whatever. And I bet you it never occurred to me that it was smart to not name it resume.pdf, because, you're going to get 10,000 of those. But when you said it, I went, oh, of course, right? And here I am. I think I lucked into that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, but it's like a valuable, like it's a simple thing, right? Make things easier for people. Ancient Coder's asking, and I don't know if you guys are like how you guys are feeling about time. I'm getting tired, but there is another question here. Really moving off onto the topic of, I think this is about the job and maybe even more interviews and the job than the resume, but are interpersonal skills important in dev jobs?
Absolutely.
That's it. Right? I mean, honestly, you can expand upon that, but absolutely, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's, I don't know, with the classic developer, right? Hold up in the corner, headphones on, head down, just, cranking out code. And that's, there are short bursts of things where that happens, but I think that's more and more less a percentage of your time doing that, and more of it working with the team, collaborating with the team, helping, either seeking help because you're stuck or helping other people who might be stuck, right? Yeah, pairing up on things and talking through problems. I think that, the days of not interacting with everybody and just going off and coding are long gone.
Yeah.
I think it is possible to be successful just being like, man, the person is just a great developer. But to be seen as someone who makes their teammates and the company better. And when I say that, it's all those little bits and pieces, like you said, the skills of just helping others, helping the team, your own management, it's interpersonal. Heck, let's talk like your own skills, right? Your time management, your ability to deliver, and also ability to explain the problems you're facing so that others understand why it's not being delivered as timely, and collaborating and presenting to those who are technical, non-technical, executive level. Can you explain these things to them in ways that help them? Yeah.
Right.
It's amazing, right?
So hey,
just one comment.
There's a tip, right? How about, thinking about, I want to bring it back to the people that talk about not having a lot of experience, right? So
wait, before you jump off of that,
just one you put on your resume. What's that?
Just before you jump off of that, one thing, I think you're right. There is that, there's going to be a balance, right? And you might be the great coder, but those interpersonal skills at some point in time are going to, not having those are going to be a detriment to you. And it doesn't matter how good a coder you are if you're not interacting with the rest of the team. And, there's definitely that balance, right? And being a great coder is only going to get you so far. Sorry, now we...
No. So I'm totally with you on that, right? I was simply taking it back to the resume conversation, right? And saying like, how can you prove that on your resume? We talked about people saying, I don't have a lot of experience in the beginning, but how can you demonstrate the fact that, sure, I'm a beginner software developer and I'm applying for a beginner job and I'm going to be good. But more than just a developer, like I can do the presentation. Like you're not going to be embarrassed to have me come in and, oh, it's my first job. But no, you can count on me in the room with the team, with the boss, or if you need me to step in and make that presentation, I can do that. And so are there things that you can highlight in your resume, like other experience that may sort of help show that? And I don't know what that is, but it might be a side job that you had that just gave you more experience in sales or something like, oh, wow, you did sales. That might not seem like it's relevant, but yeah, a lot goes into sales. Maybe that's an example, right? Or maybe I joined in college, I went in the debate club or the speech club or, some sort of thing like that. And you think, well, that might be something that would help someone out with their presentation. You know what I mean? Like get that on your resume if you can.
Yeah. No, I agree. We talked about gaps. We talked, experience is experience. It's what did you learn from it? If you didn't learn anything from it, then it's tougher to have it sit there and not be able to talk to it well. But I think most people can say, can have some example of something they learned in all those positions.
Right. There's another question. Do we want to take another question? I mean, I feel like when there's questions in chat, it's hard to walk away.
You hear that, guy? So Andy will talk all night if you keep putting questions in the chat.
They just start asking questions. What is your name? What is your quest? Yeah. What's your favorite color? Blue, no yellow. Like the whole Monty
Poof,
Python
we're going, guys.
I mean, this is a really good big question here.
Is that the last one?
Any advice specifically to those attempting to come off of disability, dropped out of college and have no real work history because of it? Should one attempt to beat around the bush and not mention it or be open about it?
Shoot. Sorry. Hang on. Let's try that again. Feature chat jumped.
Oh, I saw it in chat. It was there, wasn't it?
It was. And
what?
Yeah, it's coming back.
So,
okay.
So I want to at least address what I believe to be, in some jurisdictions, including the United States, some legal issues about being asked. That's not to say that people won't wonder why you are probably older than another person with similar experience. People are going to wonder no matter what the rules are, but I believe that that's out of bounds. Now that doesn't mean that you're not allowed. I'm really not answering the question, right?
Mm-hmm.
Should I be open about it?
Right. You don't have to be open. Well, the question is how in this question, and that's being posed here, when it says come off a disability, that could mean a lot of things, right? That could mean it's not about the disability, but the fact that you have been out of work for 10 months or something like that because of something, right? And you don't have to get into what the disability was, but the fact is you were out of the workforce. Like, how do you deal with that, right? They'd likely ask about the gap, right? And so here's the thing, right? You have the gap in work and you don't know how to disclose it. So that's a good question that I'm not sure the legality about that. I know there are certain things you can't ask about, but I think it's sort of a normal question to say, hey, I heard you were, I see that there's a gap in your resume or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. I think if you responded with, and again, this is really just I think, if you responded with something that said, oh, well, I had a disability or I had a surgery or something like that, I think the interviewer at the end of that has to say like, okay, great. Well, welcome back to the work. Like, that's not what we're going to be focusing on.
Yeah.
Because that's sort of like
you're asking
for protected class is what it's referred to as, a protected class, right? And so it's probably not an area that would have any relevance to the job that you're going to do or something like that. And so but there are people that like the other part of the question about dropping out of college and having no real work history. I recently, I've had the experience to hire someone who was coming off of maternity leave, right? Who, was kind of coming in and saying, listen, I got to be honest, like I did this job, like it was like 6 years ago. I forget what the thing was. It was like 6 years ago when I did this job, and I've been out of the workforce, and here I am. It was pretty obvious from the resume, like, well, what have you been doing? Well, I was out of the workforce, raising a family. So then we just got right down to business and said, okay, well, let's talk about your skills. What do you think your strengths and weaknesses are, and et cetera, et cetera. And they got the job, So,
Cool. Yeah.
I think, dropping out of college to me, again, it really depends. Everything's different here. I don't care if you went to college or not. I don't care if you dropped out of college. What have you done, to make up for that, right? You might have dropped out of college, but okay. Did you start figuring out how to be a software developer on your own? Okay, good. You figured it out on your own. Congratulations. It's hard to say whether someone should beat around the bush or be on or not mention it. I think it depends on each person and probably how comfortable they are with their own story and how much they want to share. But I think Chris is right about the disability in particular. That's sort of a non-issue. If you can do the job, you can do the job.
I mean, one thought, we're not job expert people, right? We have a good bit of experience because we've been put on one side of the table or the other throughout the course of our careers, either interviewing or being the interviewer. I think if you have a situation like that and you're getting yourself back into the workforce, then it's worth having a conversation with someone, whose their job it is to kind of help people get back into that workforce. Or, there are, we talked about LinkedIn. There are all kinds of great videos up on LinkedIn about, interviews and getting back to work, especially, with what we've gone through for the last 18 months. So I would, if you're in that spot, I would definitely say, talk to some experts, do some of those informational interviews, with people who may be in places where you're not potentially going to interview with, right? Just talk through it, right? You're trying to figure some way to, and I think that, shows, that you're trying to, that you're getting yourself in a good spot to be a good employee. And I think, all of those things together can certainly help your cause and your case to get back to work. But yeah, I would definitely say, spend the time and talk to someone professional around that.
And it's an interesting follow-up that Devonzara put in. You could beat around the bush and say, "Oh, I just decided to take some time off, right, and pursue things, and now I decided to come back to the work." You could do that, right? And it said, just curious enough, mentioning a disability would hurt or help my chances. And this last sentence is really interesting. I know some companies actually try to meet a quota by hiring those with disabilities. Well, I don't know that at all, right? But I could imagine that being a scenario, and that, excuse me, and that's sort of an interesting twist to the whole thing. Is that some sort of advantage, right? And the thing is, without getting into personal stuff here, there's a million different kind of disabilities that someone could have, and I could imagine that some employers, and even though they shouldn't, they should all be, not necessarily caring about those things, but some employers could be biased against a particular disability, and then there are other disabilities where they'd say, "Oh yeah, that's fine," right? Like you just don't know. You just don't know, and so I think you'd have to make I guess if it was me, and again, this is just not legal advice, whatever. I guess I would try to decide, knowing my disability, is that something that the employer would see that as potentially see that as a positive, and I might be a little private about it if I thought that they could see it as a negative.
Well, yeah. The thing that I wonder though is, depending on the company you go to, you may already be screened by like HR. These are the folks who should be the experts, both in, I mean, heck, in law, right? The employment law, the relevant employment law. And if you're in the United States, I believe that it would be perfectly fine for an interviewer to just kind of ask informally, like, hey, so, you have a gap here. Is there anything that you can tell me about that? But you got to be very careful. First of all, if the candidate answers no, to poke, got to be careful. And then if the candidate does just open and says like, well, I've been recovering and working. Listen, I don't even know the right language to use. I totally apologize, but like,
yeah.
But I'm certainly trying to get back into the workforce, dealing with a disability. Once you say those words, that interviewer had better move on, or HR is going to be very nervous about the liability that's being opened up.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm thinking to myself in my head, I'm going like, like be careful here.
Move on and evaluate. Yeah, I need to move on and evaluate objectively. Like it becomes more important, right? Because I chose, like, another thing, steer clear. I know this sounds, so let me pick something that's very minor. Be careful, and I know we're talking about interviewing now, not resume building, but I would be careful to ask like a question about where. It's so easy in a matter of conversation. Hey, so where do you live? Like that sounds harmless, but be careful that it's not later interpreted that you didn't choose the candidate because you might have been afraid they couldn't get to work. And it's just none of your business. It's just none of your business. The candidate is telling you, I can come here to this job. If you later are shown that, well, I figured that it'd be too long of a commute, you didn't have the right to make that determination. And so
amen to that. Yeah, amen to that. I hear that all the time. People are saying, oh, well, that person lives kind of far. Are we sure that they can make it? Hey, all I care is that they say they can make it. It's their problem, like that they live far from the office. Like they want the job. Can they do the job? I don't care if they get up at 3:00 in the morning. I mean, I do, but like, good for them. They want this job,
Yeah. Because if you focus on it in the interview, it could later present a liability issue of like, well, I think this is why I didn't get hired. So move on, and I know I'm presenting it from the other side. So when we talk about the idea of should you just kind of ignore it? Well, maybe not, right? It's important. This is a protected issue. Just like you talked about the candidate coming back from maternity.
Right. Yeah.
Protected,
Yeah. Well, they were telling about why they were off the workforce for a while.
Yeah. Yep.
And okay, great. Yep. So let's talk about why you're coming back to the workforce, or let's, what skills are you bringing and stuff like that. So, probably we should move on. But Devin, Zara, I would, talk to people that that you trust, that you want to share your information with. Consult with your friends and your mentors, or if you have them, and things like that, and get more advice. I hope we helped in some way, but that's a big open-ended question with a lot of it depends in there, right? But I think what Chris is saying is if you do reveal that legally, shouldn't matter, right? What do you think? I don't know. I'm tired.
I think you folks have done a lot, and I feel like, wow, I came in and still it was a nice long show. These kind of topics are great because
we're just getting started.
Yeah, these kind of topics can come back again and again, and there'll still be people who hopefully hear about the show, see us on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel, maybe come to the live streams Wednesdays at 8:30 p.m. the U.S. Eastern Time Zone, and can ask your questions next time. So hopefully you got something that you enjoyed out of this and that you'll be back again. And I think, Rich, we can even talk about next week, right?
Yeah, I would love to talk about next week. And Andy, you have your screen that you're sharing, right? Can you bring up the meetup?
Yeah, I forgot I had my screen that I was sharing. I forgot I never turned it off. I think you want me to go to where do you want me to go? Meetup or?
Yeah, let's go to Meetup.
Yeah, just our Meetup is a good start, I think. And for those of you who who are Philly.net fans, Philly.net next week is at 7 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time.
Yep.
And there's somebody, we know him, Rich Ross.
Oh, I think it's Swami.
It's gonna be talking about some features of GitHub, right? So
yeah, we're probably gonna reel that in and make it focused on actions. And there's if you go out to that event and there are things that you want to see there, put some comments in, because I'd love to hear what people are doing with actions and kind of where they want to take things. So
that's kind of hard. That's hard to read for some reason. But on the Dev Talk Show meetup,
can you zoom in on that?
What's that? I can zoom in, sure.
Yeah, that'll make it a little
on
better.
the Dev Talk Show meetup, which is, if you go to meetup.com and search the Dev Talk Show, that's actually the easiest way, because I can give you the link and then you'll be like, oh man, because we can post the link up on the screen and it's like, oh, am I gonna?
I put it in the chat to make it easy too.
Yeah, am I gonna? But anyways, if you go to meetup.com and search the Dev Talk Show, you'll see that our next event, is that scheduled correctly, October 20th, 8:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. We have an app that we're building in the cloud with some cloud features like event grid, so like an event streaming architecture, I suppose. I hate some of these terms because they sound so, like, they mean a lot to a lot of different people. So I don't want to confuse anyone. Going to use Azure Functions, going to use SignalR and more, and it's kind of like a walkthrough of some things that we think are pretty exciting, and maybe you can get some ideas for your own applications. But it's coming together, I think. Yeah. So it's be pretty fun.
Chris has been working on this for a while. We've been talking about it the last, I guess, couple of weeks, kind of leading up to this, and I'm just blown away by what he's been able to do with it. So I'm really looking forward to the ability to go ahead and show this to everybody next week. So yeah, definitely going to make sure that I attend this one.
Yeah, and I think what we're going to try to do, so those of you who are good friends of ours, is we should be using the Twitch schedule feature, and we should be using the YouTube event feature, just so that people will know it's coming. But that's the plan here on Twitch and YouTube at 8:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern. We're going to use a little bit of event grid to fire off notifications that get picked up by things like Azure Functions and websites and stuff. And I'm hoping that it's a good example of maybe of an event-based kind of architecture, right?
That sounds great.
You got the buzzword.
I hope so. I mean,
we haven't done that, I don't think, ever on the show. We've dabbled in SignalR. We may have talked about Azure Functions. I don't recall Event Grid as a topic in the past, so I think it's really cool.
Yeah, and if you put all of those words on your resume, I'm sure you could get a heck of a job in Azure. Bringing it back to where we are.
Yeah. I will tell you what, no kidding, this would be the kind of thing that I would say get into GitHub and do little things like make it publishable straight from GitHub, which is possible. I've seen that. I've seen people, you can put a button right in your GitHub repo that'll say like deploy this straight to the cloud, and you got to provide the information for your subscription, and it's done very smartly. Like you're not handing that over to the repo maintainer or anything. And then boom, it's deployed, and people love stuff like that. Like especially if I was an employer and I'm like, oh well, this person says that they did this, and then there's even a button that I can try it out. Heck, let's try it out, That starts to show you get a little bit of CI/CD under your belt. You kind of understand deployment. Oh, you don't have to, you're not trying to say you're a DevOps executive, but you get some of the basics, right? So
definitely.
All right, cool.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Hang on.
Fun. Yeah. So I think we could wrap this one up. This is a show. This was fun. Glad Chris made it. A little late, but he gets full credit, I think. Right, Rich? We're not going to hold him to that.
The show was his idea.
Full credit for Chris. What's that?
The show was his idea.
The whole show, the Dev Talk Show.
No, the rest of my idea. We were chatting this morning.
Oh, I thought, yeah, but I think the whole show might have been his idea too. I don't know. It wasn't my idea. It was your guys, I think. Anyway, point is, we're glad he's here, and really glad. Lots of great interaction with viewers today. It makes the show so much fun for us, and we learn from everybody. We hope you learn from us. We like learning from you guys, and so this was in particular a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this show. If you're watching it in the future, on YouTube, smash that like button. And subscribe to us on YouTube. If you're here on Twitch, follow us, or again, if you're watching us live on YouTube, subscribe to us, and you can see what's coming, what we're going to be doing in the future. We just keep the content coming, and we have a good time, and we hope you do too. We're all learning. So I know where you're all going to be next Wednesday, October 20th. Chris already set the stage for that. We'll see you all back here if Wednesday nights at 8:30 p.m. on the Dev Talk Show.